Chapter 5, Part 4. All we're going to do with this particular You Do It section is we are going to modify the create event object that we created in Part 3. You may recall when we were talking about going in and creating the nested ifs, how sometimes this isn't a good idea. It's not always the cleanest way to do it, that possibly using a switch statement would be better. This happens to be one of those cases. Usually if you get over two choices, you probably need to start looking at a switch. In this particular case, we've got 4 separate choices, so it's a little bit cloudy. It's a little bit harder to follow. Now, what we need to do to complete Part 4 here is just simply go in to create event object, remove all of this if statement here, and we're going to replace that with the switch. Do not remove the second decision structure, because we do need to keep that one. That's where we figure out if we've got a good choice or not. So we just need to go in and remove from event type, right below that, all the way to if choice is good. So we just want to remove that nested if to determine what our event type is going to be. We are going to replace that section of code with a switch statement. So here you will notice that all of that code has been replaced with a switch. Now let's talk about how a switch is going to work. Instead of having to pick is event type 1, is event type 2, is event type 3, is event type whatever that we had to do over here, we are going to just one time check to see what event type is going to be. Then we're going to do the comparisons as we move down the code. We start every switch with the word switch. There has to be an opening and a closing curly brace to signify where the switch belongs. Where's the beginning, where's the end. Each option in that switch is going to begin with a case. The default is the what if all of these are not true. What are we going to do about the error checking? Okay, so you'll recall over here we had if event is 1, if event is 2, if event is 3, if event is any of these other than a 1, 2, or 3, if it's a 4 or a 10 or a 7, do this last else. That's where we're going to catch the default. That's our error checking. So if case is equal to private code, then choose your manager, choose your rate. If it is corporate code, again, choose your manager and rate, nonprofit, manager, rate. It's basically the same thing we've got over here. But let me minimize this one down. See how much easier it is to read your switch? If it is this, if it's this, if it's this. It's very easy to follow. This over here in the first program, the if-else's, gets a little harder to distinguish, harder to read. Now, one thing you do need to pay attention to over here in the switch statement, if the selection is private code, you're going to perform this. If it's not, you're going to go down and look to see if it's corporate code. If it's not, you're going to drop down to find out if it's a nonprofit. If it's not, you're going to do the default. Well, what if you are looking for the private code? You're looking for number 1 as your choice. You come in, you find the first switch item, the first case there. There's really no need to fall through the code and see if it's corporate or see if it's nonprofit or to see if it's the default. That's the reason we have the break statements. The break is basically a break in code. It says, okay, you have found something that meets this requirement. Stop. Fall to the bottom of the switch and proceed on with the next line of code. So for example, you've entered in an event type of a 1. We check to see what the switch type is. or the event type, sorry, for the switch is 1. So we're going to do, it is a private code, choose your manager, choose your rate, break. Now this break does nothing but takes you to that curly brace at the very bottom of that switch statement to check to see if the choice is good, and then to provide you with the output. Same thing happens if it's 2 for corporate, 3 for nonprofit. If it is not 1, 2, or 3, it falls down to the default, sets the choice as good to false. Now you'll notice I don't have a break with the false, with the default statement, because there's nowhere else to go but the end of the switch. So there's no need for a break. But for all the other choices, I do need a break because I do need to remove you from that switch statement. All right, let's go in and compile and run our program here. You will notice that I'm being asked, what type of event are you scheduling? I'm going to schedule a 1 for private. There's Dustin. 2, I get Cameron. 3, I get Robin. And 4, I get the invalid choice. So you'll see this program runs exactly the way that Create Event Object did. However, it's just a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to follow because of the use of the switch statement. That concludes part number 4 of Chapter 5, as well as all of the UDOITs for Chapter 5.